Most people know Cristiano Ronaldo as one of the greatest footballers of all time. They know the records, the trophies, the moments of brilliance that have defined his career. But what if there was a story, one buried beneath the fame, hidden behind the cameras, that could change the way we see him forever? A promise made long ago, lost in the whirlwind of success. Until one day, it came calling. Cristiano was just a boy when he made the vow, a scrawny kid on the streets of Madeira with dreams far too big for the island that raised him. Football was everything, but hunger was a constant companion. His mother did what she could, but there were nights when the only thing filling his stomach was the sound of his own dreams whispering, "Keep going." One evening, after a grueling training session, he found himself wandering through the dimly lit streets, pockets empty, hunger gnawing at his insides. That's when he met Pedro, an old street vendor selling roasted chestnuts on the corner, his face weathered by time, yet his eyes carrying a warmth that defied his struggles. Pedro saw the boy hesitate, looking at the food but knowing he had nothing to give in return. Without a word, the old man scooped a handful of chestnuts into a paper bag and placed it in his hands. "Eat," he said. "You'll need your strength for what's coming." Ronaldo devoured them, overwhelmed by the simple act of kindness. The two talked. Pedro spoke of life, of dreams, of the world beyond Madeira. But what struck the young boy the most was Pedro's unwavering belief in him. One day, you will be someone the world knows, and when that happens, never forget where you came from. Ronaldo, moved by the gesture, made a vow. "If I make it, I'll come back. I'll change your life." Pedro simply smiled. "Then I will wait." Time, however, does not wait. The years rolled on, and Ronaldo's world changed. From the moment he stepped into the sporting academy, he knew he was on the path to something greater, but he had no idea just how far it would take him. The night he dazzled against Manchester United, securing his ticket to England, Pedro's words flickered in his mind, but only briefly. The Premier League, the Champions League, the Ballon d'Or, all of it consumed him, demanding every piece of his being. In moments of victory, he thought of his mother, his father, his country. But Pedro became a fading memory, buried beneath the weight of fame and expectation. Years turned into decades. He conquered England, Spain, and Italy, built a legacy that would outlive him, became a global icon. Yet, it wasn't until one quiet evening in Turin, flipping through old photographs, that Pedro's face reappeared. The memory hit him like a forgotten debt, the promise. Had he really let that moment slip away? He called his mother, his sister, anyone who might remember, but no one knew what had become of Pedro. Determined to make good on his vow, Ronaldo returned to Madeira. His arrival met with the usual media frenzy. Cameras followed him everywhere, assuming it was just another visit home. But this time, he wasn't here for a vacation. He walked the old streets, visited the same corner where Pedro's cart once stood, but it was gone. He asked the locals, the vendors who had been there for years. Some vaguely remembered Pedro, but no one had seen him in a long time. "He just disappeared," one vendor said. "Vanished, like smoke in the wind." Ronaldo refused to give up. He searched city records, traced old addresses, even knocked on doors. Finally, a fisherman by the harbour gave him a lead. Pedro used to speak of an old friend by the cliffs. The cliffs. Ronaldo knew them well. As a boy, he had trained there, running along the rugged edges, chasing the impossible. Now he climbed them again, but not for football. At the top, sitting on a weathered bench staring out at the vast Atlantic, was a frail old man. His clothes were worn, his hands trembling slightly, but when Ronaldo stepped closer, there was no mistaking those eyes. Pedro looked up and smiled faintly. "I knew you'd come," he said, as if time had never passed. Ronaldo felt a lump rise in his throat. "I should have come sooner." Pedro chuckled, a sound both brittle and warm. "You had a world to conquer. I was never lost, Cristiano. I was waiting." Tears threatened to break through, but Ronaldo held them back. He listened as Pedro spoke of the years gone by, of losing his home, of wandering, of never asking for more than what life gave him. And yet, despite everything, he never once resented the boy who had promised to return. "I never needed riches," Pedro said, "only to know that I mattered." Ronaldo refused to let their reunion be the end of Pedro's story. This man had given him kindness when the world had nothing to offer, and now Ronaldo was determined to return that kindness tenfold. Without hesitation, he arranged for Pedro to move into a beautiful villa perched on the cliffs of Madeira, where the ocean stretched endlessly beyond the horizon. The house, bathed in warm golden light at sunset, had floor-to-ceiling windows that allowed Pedro to watch the waves crash against the shore, an unbroken view of the sea he had always loved. But it wasn't just about luxury. Ronaldo made sure Pedro had everything he needed: medical care, a personal chef who cooked the hearty meals he had once gone without, and a garden filled with flowers Pedro had always admired but never had the means to plant. At first, the old man resisted, insisting he had lived simply for too long to be surrounded by such extravagance. But as the days passed, he softened, realizing that this wasn't charity, it was gratitude. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit streets of Funchal. Old vendors, childhood friends, and even strangers who had once crossed paths with Pedro began visiting, their voices filling the villa with the sounds of laughter and nostalgia. They swapped stories, reminiscing about the days when Pedro's tiny cart stood on the corner, offering chestnuts to weary passers-by. Some brought old photographs, faded but precious, capturing moments of a life that had quietly shaped so many others. One vendor, now an old man himself, broke down in tears as he grasped Pedro's hand. "You fed us when no one else did," he said. "And now look at you, Pedro. Look at what you mean to the world." Despite his frailty, Pedro's spirit thrived in those final months. He would sit on the villa's terrace, a thick woolen blanket draped over his shoulders, watching the sunset with Ronaldo by his side. They spoke of the past, the promise, and the winding roads life had taken them on. "You were always meant for greatness," Pedro said one evening, his voice weak but full of certainty. "But do you know what makes you truly great? Not the goals, not the trophies, but this, remembering." When Pedro passed, it was not in loneliness or hardship, but in peace. He slipped away in his sleep, his hands resting gently by his sides as if embracing the life he'd finally been given. Ronaldo stood by his bedside that morning, looking at the man who had once fed a starving boy with nothing but hope. There were no cameras, no reporters, just silence, just gratitude, just a promise fulfilled. A week later, in a game watched by millions, Ronaldo scored a goal and pointed to the sky. Not for a fallen teammate, not for a lost family member, but for the man who had once waited on a street corner with nothing to give but kindness and had given everything. The media soon uncovered the story, and it spread like wildfire. But it wasn't the wealth, the house, or the money that struck people the most. It was the fact that after all these years, in a world where promises are so easily broken, Cristiano Ronaldo had remembered. And perhaps, in the end, that is the true measure of greatness, not in goals, trophies, or fortune, but in the lives we touch along the way. Some promises fade, some are buried under the weight of success. But the ones that truly matter, they never die.